Hello, everyone. It's Paleo 101 here, and today I have a new format. I'm using Zoom for this particular type of video today, and I really wanted to talk about my internship at the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science. I know it's been a long time since I've kind of made a video. I did a little short video on minerals, like pulling of the drawer minerals, and that really wasn't even considered a video. But I really wanted to talk about my internship more in depth and what being a paleo intern was like for the past 2 weeks at the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science during the summer. And so on the starting of June 27th, I met up with George Phillips, who's the curator of paleontology at the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science at the McWane Science Center. And this was kind of our meetup section at the McWane Science Center in Birmingham, Alabama. And so here's on the left is the McWane Science Center, and here's me on the right with George Phillips, meeting up with George Phillips. The McWane Science Center is actually a very fantastic museum with a really great display. There's an upstairs display of their fossil hall, and their fossil section is incredible. It really touches on the paleontology of the southeastern part of the United States. So here are a couple of mosasaur fossils that have been found in Greene County, Alabama, and other places. Mosasaurs are large marine reptiles that existed around 76 to 70 million years ago in the later part of the Cretaceous period. And their fossils are very, very common and are representative of the Alabama sands and Alabama chalks as well. There's also mosasaur fossils here that have been found in Mississippi and other fossils such as that. Other fossils that were found in those Cretaceous seas includes ammonites. So ammonites are these large to small cephalopods that existed. And here are pictures of a couple of ammonites on display in their fossil gallery. Now, a lot of the things that I really like to touch on and learn a lot about are the dinosaurs from the southeastern part of the United States. And these are actually dinosaur fossils that were found in Mississippi or in Alabama. Here up on the top are the holotype specimen of Appalachiosaurus montgomeryensis, a large tyrannosauroid that was described in, I believe, 2006 by David Schwimmer and other paleontologists. And here on the left is actually the parts of the foot of Appalachiosaurus that were discovered. And then here on the right is actually the skeleton of Appalachiosaurus, the reconstructed skeleton of Appalachiosaurus. Now, there is a debate going on whether Appalachiosaurus had long forearms with 3-fingered hands, tipped with sharp claws, or it may have had short, stubby arms like you would see in Tyrannosaurus Rex with 2-fingered hands. So there's a debate. There hasn't been there's only the skeleton of Appalachiosaurus is incomplete, and the arms haven't been discovered. So it's been really difficult to try to figure out what this animal would have looked like. But based upon the anatomy, we know that it's a tyrannosauroid and possibly an early tyrannosaur from the later part of the Cretaceous, the Campanian. Other fossils include raptor dinosaurs, dromaeosaurs. So on the bottom on the bottom left here is a skeleton of a dromaeosaur. And teeth and other pieces of bones have been described and found from the southeastern part of the United States. And then here on the right is actually the lower jaw, the maxilla, the upper jaw of the nodosaur, these early ankylosaurs. And so the first trip that I was able to go on was to an Alabama site. Right when we were headed to Jackson, Mississippi, we stopped at this local rock site called the Prairie Bluff Chalk. Prairie Bluff Chalk is a late Cretaceous deposit, and it's about 70 million years old. So part of the Maastrichtian stage of the later part of the Cretaceous. And what I'm sitting on is chalk. Chalk is a sedimentary rock that actually is formed by the small planktonic organisms, these calcareous algae, that were raining down in the seafloor and actually were building up over time lots of this chalk. And you'll find a lot of chalk in places in Mississippi and Alabama. In fact, be surprised, or maybe not be surprised, that I talk about the Prairie Bluff Chalk a lot, because that's one of the main Cretaceous sites that we actually investigated. So I'll be mentioning the Prairie Bluff Chalk in this video. And so here I am, and then George Phillips is looking for a couple of fossils. But on the left here, I'm pointing out a fish vertebra that was discovered. And then George Phillips on the right here is looking for a small echinoid that he's been trying to show me. So first day at the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science, I toured their fossil gallery, and it was a lot of fun looking at the various fossils that were found in Mississippi and that were on display. And it was really cool to really look at their fossil gallery and see what they had on display. And then on the right here, I spent a lot of time in the paleontology and biology lab or the mammalogy lab, looking at fossils and looking at microfossils under a microscope and picking them out. I also got to snoop around the paleontology collections, and that was a lot of fun. I spent a lot of time in there just looking at the various different types of fossils that were on display. That were on display in the museum collections. I had a fantastic time looking at various different fossils from all over the place. Some from the western part of the United States, others from the eastern part of the United States, from Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Montana, just various different types of fossils that were on display. So on the right here is me actually on one of their shelves at with various different types of fossils. And on the right here is actually me holding a fossil vertebra of an Archaeocene early whale known as Basilosaurus cetoides, which is actually the state fossil of Alabama. And Mississippi also has a state fossil, and there's also a Archaeocene whale known as Zygorrhiza. And I saw pieces of their skeleton. In fact, one individual skeleton actually on display in their prep lab. So here are some other fossils that I got to look at. We were looking at various different types of fossils from mosasaur materials. So on the left here is the jaw of a mosasaur that was found in the Prairie Bluff Chalk. And on the right here are various different types of shells known as exogyra. I'll be saying that a lot too, because exogyra was one of the main invertebrate fossils that we found in late Cretaceous deposits. So first day out in the field, we went to Bay Springs, which is just a couple miles away from Jackson County, Jackson, Mississippi. And this is in Bay Springs, Mississippi. And we were actually collecting fossils from the lower Oligocene rock. So I'm right here in the Mariana Formation, which is roughly about 30 million years old or so. And we were collecting fossils from there. And we found various different types of fossils from that locality. Echinoids, we found shells, pectins, oysters, all kinds of different types of fossils. And so this particular unit, we were actually in a rock quarry, and there are different types of rock units that are actually represented in this particular strata here. So on the lower portion, we were collecting from the Mint Springs Formation. And then up here is the Mariana Formation, which is where we mainly were collecting, or I was collecting a lot of the echinoids from there. And then up on the top is the Glidden Formation. So these are various different types of fossils that were found. Here is a Clepiaster sand dollar fossil. I found a couple of those, some intact, some not. In the middle here, we have a fossil crab that I actually found called Necronectes vani, a fossil crab. And then on the right here, the upper right is actually just a big block full of fossil pectins. So this is a really cool picture. So this is actually a Clepiaster. So George Phillips called me over while I was looking at some other fossils from a distance away from from where this was found. And we all huddled together and we all saw this Clepiaster echinoid just sitting on this pedestal of sediment. And I actually have the specimen. I was actually able to collect it, and it's in the collections now, in my personal collection. So this is a Clepiaster echinoid perching on just a little hoodoo. So I thought that was really cool to take a picture of. The other site that we went to, we went to another locality where this locality is abundant in echinoids. And so we collected from the Winona Formation, which is Middle Eocene. And these are Protoscutella mississippiensis echinoids. So I found a lot of those. The thing about these particular echinoids is that they're very, very fragile. They're what we call their test is very thin, and so they can break easily. We were actually on the side of a riverbank near the Chickasaw Chickasawhay River and collecting these echinoids from this sediment. And I started to get really frustrated because every time I would dig to collect one of these fossils, they would break in half because their test um, is very fragile. They're made out of very thin plates. But nevertheless, I did manage to come back with some complete Protoscutella echinoids from this locality. So one of the memorable localities that was able to go on this trip was to look at the KPG boundary. You may recognize or may heard of the KPG boundary, the Cretaceous Paleogene boundary, from various different shows, and a lot of the sites of the KPG boundary, some of the best sites occur in the western part of the United States, places in Colorado, Montana, South Dakota. But in the southeastern part of the United States, the KPG boundary is also represented, but it's represented a lot differently than the KPG boundary that's represented in the western part of the United States. So here we actually have the lower Prairie Bluff Chalk, which is a later Cretaceous deposit. It's about 70 million years old. And then right in the middle, we actually have the extinction zone. And then above, we have the Clayton Formation, which is Paleocene in age. So you're basically looking at is the KPG boundary or the Cretaceous Paleogene boundary. So you're looking at the actual boundary. So below this is where we find a lot of Cretaceous fossils. And then above that, we find no Cretaceous fossils at all. So there's an extinction going on there. One of the main fossils that we actually were able to find was a particular index fossil from the from the Danian of the Paleocene, from the Clayton Formation. And that was called, I'm forgetting. I think it's Puliscensis. The species name is Puliscensis, Pycnodont puliscensis. There we go. Pycnodont puliscensis is the fossil oyster that we found from the Clayton Formation, which is the index fossil for the Paleocene. So if you do find that fossil, you know you're in the Paleocene. And then right in the Cretaceous, you'll find oysters like Exogyra. You'll also find ammonites as well that are found in these Cretaceous marine beds. And above that, you don't find any of those particular fossils at all. So we know there was an extinction event going on here. And I think probably one of the coolest things that were found were these spheroids. And so spheroids are basically these glass beads that rain down towards the asteroid impact. So as the asteroid impacted, it pretty much solidified and created this particular material from the surrounding sediment, this terrestrial sediment, and flung it back into the air and pretty much turned it into a natural glass, something that we call tektites. And I mentioned a lot of that in some of the Cretaceous Paleogene videos that I've made. And we actually were in the sediment and we actually found these particular glass beads that were degraded over time, were reworked in the Clayton Formation. And it was really cool to actually find that particular evidence of these terrestrial sediments that were later turned into a natural glass, decayed over time, and then reworked into the Clayton Formation. So I think going into the KPG boundary was probably one of the most memorable experiences of my early career. Here's another Prairie Bluff Chalk site in Starkville, Mississippi. And we were actually behind these homes, and it was actually a vast field of chalk. We found various different types of fossils, Exogyra. We found some shark's teeth. We found a couple of pieces of ammonites called Baculites, which is a very straight-shelled ammonite. But at the end, it probably would have had a coil. But these were straight-shelled ammonites. We only found these steinkerns, which are the sediment and filled. The shell actually degraded away, but we actually find the sediment and filled shells from these ammonites. Another Prairie Bluff Chalk locality. This is where we found giant Exogyra shells. We found large Exogyras, probably the size of, I want to probably say soccer ball size. These were huge oysters, and we've actually found an oyster bed here, as well as some beautiful echinoids. And so here are some of the fossil echinoids that were found, these fossil sea urchins from this particular locality. So this is the Prairie Bluff Chihuahua sand member. This is the Chihuahua sand member as a sandy facies. It's a late Cretaceous deposit. It's about the same age as the Prairie Bluff Chalk, but just with a different type of rock. It's a lot sandier than the Prairie Bluff Chalk is. But here's an oyster bed, Exogyra pycnodonty oyster bed that we actually found in Houston County, Mississippi. And so that was pretty much the ending of Mississippi. We went to Mississippi throughout the week that I was there, about the first week that I was there. And then the last week we ended. So we started in Alabama, and now we're ending in Alabama, ending in Sweet Home, Alabama. So the first locality we went to was this Ripley Formation in Marengo County. And this is a late Cretaceous deposit. The Ripley Formation is about 71 to 70 million years old or so, and I actually found a really cool scyphidid ammonite. So on the right here is probably what a scyphidid ammonite would have looked like. And it wasn't complete. It was just the tip of the shell, but it was still really, really cool to actually go and collect some of these fossils. This was a huge deposit. This is what we call the Upper McBride member of the Clayton Formation. Clayton Formation was laid down right after the extinction of the dinosaurs. And so this is a really, really big exposure of the Clayton Formation in Butler County. And this is lower Paleocene. This is Danian in age. And this is roughly about 60 million years old. So right after the extinction of the dinosaurs. And all of this limestone represents shallow marine deposits. And you'll find a lot of fossils in these marine deposits. One of the fossils that were actually discovered were Heteroglossea urchi, which is a large cephalopod and nautiloid that we actually found in the Clayton Formation. So you'll find a lot of those in this particular locality and other places in the Clayton Formation. And so that was probably pretty much the ending of my trip. We did go to other localities, but I'm pretty sure this video would have been quite long if I would have talked about those other types of localities. It was a fantastic experience. I learned a lot. I met a lot of geologists, I met a lot of paleontologists during that time. And I was very happy that I was able to go on this particular trip. I am so happy that I was able to have this fantastic experience working under George Phillips, who's the curator of paleontology, and getting hands-on experience with the fossils in the field and the fossils in the collections. And this is pretty much what I want to do is become a paleontologist. And this experience definitely are one of the experiences that solidified me becoming a paleontologist. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in to listening to some of my experience during my internship. And I will see you guys later with another video.